Awesome, guys. Welcome to another educational conversation with Julia and I. If you actually attended the first one, thank you so much. If you haven't attended one of these courses or these conversations live, I highly suggest you do. For those who are here today, thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come sit and listen to us talk and look at sleep as a whole. And real quick, my background, I've been doing this for about 13 years now as a human performance world. I've actually turned into a profession, and currently we are rebuilding GB3 Athletics. Julia is the owner of Full Spectrum Medicine, and she is partnering or has a partnership or collaboration with helping us build the company and adding her services, as well as she's rolling and building her company as well. And that comes from looking at it from the perspective of what your oil looks like. So blood work and hormones and that medical type of aspect from a remote coaching side of the house, which I don't think very many medical professionals are doing that today, of running with an online medical coaching service that helps you take control of your own medicine and all that. And she can probably run down the rabbit hole with that. But what I'm doing with GB3 Athletics is trying to build an active learning community. And that active learning community is going to consist of a lot of individuals that are interested in learning how to take control of their own health and wellness and actually apply it in a way that amplifies their performance. And, right now with the way that the fitness industry is growing and the way that the science industry is growing and the way that honestly the world is growing, we're seeing technology come out and become a thing, which is starting to take over the masses. And what that leaves open, and what I've found, and Julia and some of the other individuals that you'll have access to throughout this active learning community, is the fact that we look at it from an individualization standpoint. And the individualization standpoint really highlights the idea that you actually have your own unique skill sets and tools that apply to your lifestyle to help you live and navigate through your own human design as a whole. Now, what does that design look like? It looks like kind of your own self-awareness and consciousness to like what makes you feel good and what makes you operate at the highest potential, ability to be who you want to be. So what we're doing with that is going to be bringing a lot of unique information and experience and knowledge into this active learning community. And what you're seeing today is actually a door or a key into that door to allow for you to actually learn more, right? Because we would want to develop courses around sleep, courses around medical information, courses around a lot of things that'll add value, not just for us, but for you as well, so that we have deeper, more critical style conversations and thinking and problem solving aspects. So again, for the classroom today, if you have any questions throughout our lecture, please just go ahead and raise your hand. You can hit the link on your Zoom panel and it'll let you do that. As far as, conversations afterwards, you can go ahead and ask any kind of questions that relate to sleep. And if it does require more information, we will rely that to you so that we can keep the conversation moving forward as a whole. So now I just want to have Julia introduce herself before we start the presentation. Julia, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks. Hi, guys. Julia Gumpert. I own Full Spectrum Medicine PLLC. Started that in January. It is a current amalgamation of metabolic assessments, hormonal management, and performance enhancement services. I am one of Georgia's athletes, have been an athlete for quite a few years now, ultra runner. I stay home full time with the kids, which is most excellent, also hectic. I have 2 boys. My husband has 9 days left active duty in the Army. So that is the big thing around my household now, is we're finally going to have a new chapter in life. Super excited to have these educational conversations for 2 reasons. Number one, it allows us as professionals in the field to kind of weed out all the information that isn't relevant to a large majority of the population that we are doing these things for. And it also allows us to tell you from a personal experience perspective and from our background, which things you need to apply and which you don't. And now we are going to get, sleep is like one of those topics that if you listen to Huberman and Rogan and like all of these people are just bombarding you with all this stuff like red light therapy, ice, blah, blah, blah. Like there are some things, yes, all of these things are well and good, but if you skip steps 1 through 5 or you don't understand your sleep and why you need it, then all of these gadgets at the end aren't going to be useful and basically a giant money pit. So I'm excited today to have that conversation with George and to listen to your questions and to figure out what has worked for you and to help you put together a plan to improve your nights.
Awesome. So real quick, guys, the reason why I'm enjoying having these educational conversations and running down this rabbit hole is because I'm currently in my master's program. It's surrounded around English, but it's emphasizing adult higher education. And what I'm doing right now is really learning how to develop an educational community, meaning that we're all here to learn. And as adults, we all have different backgrounds, just like in our training history from sports, we have all our own backgrounds. The same thing is with education. You know, depending on the school you went to, you know, the community in which you learned in. For example, the community I came from wasn't very big in reading as a kid growing up, so I didn't read very much. It wasn't really highlighted to me until I was, you know, in the military. Same thing. Some people in a training history standpoint might not be exposed to running early on in their childhood, but then all of a sudden, when they're in high school, they're now being introduced to running. It's very similar in those intersections, and that's what I like to do. So opening the door, when we talk about sleep as the new frontier, the reason why I want to talk about sleep as the new frontier is, like, I understand that it is something that everyone's talking about. I understand that, you know, there's so much science and research and literature that's being put out right now behind sleep, and it can be very confusing. And I guess the idea from individualization is, how do we go ahead and give you something unique that allows for you to develop a new landscape or that new frontier in front of you? And what I decided to bring in today was not something that we know about in terms of, like, yes, we know we have to have sleep hygiene. We need to have really good habits. We need to go ahead and make sure that our nutrition and our hydration is on point so that we get proper sleep. But at the end of the day, when it actually becomes time to sleep, individuals are still not really grasping the idea of sleep. We're still hearing sleep disturbances are happening. We're still having a lot of issues happen, even if you are not consuming alcohol before, if you're doing all the right things. And what I've learned from this, and this comes from my degree in sports psychology and how I look at the way the mind looks at the world, is we just look at sleep as this thing that takes away from us living our life, when actually sleep is something that adds to our life, and we have to look at it in that headspace and in that worldview to allow for us to perceive sleep as this new frontier. So what am I looking at? I no longer look at sleep in terms of how many hours or what's the quality or the quantity of sleep. I look at what is my sleep in terms of quality, meaning that, hey, I have this window of time right now to go to bed and to wake up because I have X, Y, and Z on the forefront for me, and I need to make sure that I have as much energy as possible. So I need to go ahead and look at the idea of quality. So with quality of sleep, I have to go ahead and change, instead of looking at sleep instead of hours, I have to look at it in terms of cycles or windows. I have to understand what REM sleep is actually doing for me, so that I know that the longer consistent state of sleep I'm in, the more recovered I am. So it gives us a purpose to actually want to go to sleep, is the idea behind that. And what I wanted to highlight was, honestly, it's a few little points. It's nothing crazy. You know, this isn't a class where I'm diving down the rabbit hole of what sleep is. Like, no, I'm writing some stuff on that. There's projects that I'm working on for that. There'll be future courses probably on that. But this is really something that I want to highlight, is the perception in which how we look at sleep. Sleep is a state of being, and we have to understand that it helps us become who we are to actually navigate and work to the fullest. So what is sleep and the sleep frontier? Is looking at what is rapid eye movement, and understand that rapid eye movement does really matter. Now, if you've never really looked into what the stages of sleep are, I don't want to go ahead and bore you too much with what's going on with it. But what I do want to go ahead and highlight that if you look at sleep, you'll look at it, see it talks about stages or phases. Since I started perceiving looking at sleep as a state of being, I started to go ahead and create these different states in which we fall into when we are asleep. Now, I didn't take away anything. I just changed I guess a word for a label, and I just gave a new definition for it. And because it highlights the idea of state of being. So non-REM sleep, right? Non-REM sleep is going to be your rapid eye movement, and the rapid eye movement actually really matters. Now, as having children, and Julie having children, as well as whoever else is listening to this who has children, you understand that your children need sleep. They need to get anywhere between 12 to 13 to 15 hours of sleep, because if not, they become these little tiny crazy balls of energy that don't know how to control themselves. Well, it's the same exact thing that happens to us. Just as adults, we just have learned new ways to go ahead and cope with it. We have access to different substances that could either be caffeine, that could go ahead and be cocaine, that can go ahead and be Adderall, that could be Provigil. We have all of these different types of stimulus. When we wake up feeling tired, we can go ahead and mask to give us that energy. But what's happening is we're not really getting rapid eye movement type sleep. We might be spending some time in there, but again, the quality of your sleep is the issue. We're not really getting high quality sleep. We're not being efficient with that state of being. Just like when I'm out for a long run, if I'm doing jiu-jitsu, or if you're in the gym training, anything how you look at it, you need to have that energy in a positive manner, because if you don't, it increases your stress, it increases your ability to go ahead and get injured, and it realistically takes away from you really seeing the adaptations and the result that you want, and it slows it down by blunting it because you lack the time in REM sleep. Now, when we go ahead and look at REM sleep, that is a rapid eye movement state, meaning that you have now fallen into a state of sleep that allows for your eyes to start working. And the reason why they use rapid eye movements from a neurological standpoint is you can go ahead and see someone's eyes start to move underneath the pupils when they start to hit these states of sleep. Now, again, I'm not going to go super in depth of what this looks like, but understand this, and I'm just going to create a feeling awareness towards these states of sleep. So the transition to sleep is realistically one of those things where you kind of just close your eyes and you kind of just start to breathe. And in that very small moment, it can last anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes. And now 30 minutes is very extended. 10 minutes is mostly the time there. And there's where you have control of all your thoughts, what your heart rate's doing. You have a lot of control over your normal bodily functions and what the mind is doing, where this is where that intent or that perception allows for you to look at it in the state of, okay, it's time to go to bed. I tell myself it's time to go to bed. I have certain aspects that I need to do or behaviors that I can do to go ahead and get me to transition into state 2. And what I can do is I can play with taking some deep breaths and focus on that. And all of a sudden now you'll find yourself no longer really in control of what's going on from a physiological standpoint, a little bit still from a mental standpoint, but this is that light sleep. You're going to start like you're falling, like you're fading away. This is actually that time period where you are probably woken up the most during that time and moment, because of the fact you are most susceptible to sensory deprivation as it's starting to pull away from you. So that's a big thing that we want to go ahead and highlight, is because that light sleep is where everybody usually comes out of right away and is woken up and is like, man, what the heck just happened? It's hard to fall asleep. So what happens is if you are able to get through that state, which is going to be anywhere between 20 to 25 minutes, we now go ahead and move into that state 3, which is your deep sleep, where this is the magic. This is like where the magic happens. And when I say magic, it's more of creativity, and all these little things start to kind of amplify. But this is where you actually are in a deep sleep, where your body is now just in this state of paralysis, kind of the idea, if you want to think about it. And it allows for us to go ahead and access certain types of brain waves. It allows for our body to start actually doing all the right things, and allows for us to go ahead and start really truly recovering from a hormonal standpoint, a neurological standpoint, and from a physiological standpoint. And what ends up happening is if you're able to get through that state and into state 4, this is now the superpower. This is the state you want to be in. This is where the brain starts to make all these cool little connections. You start to have dreams. You start to have a lot of these different types of benefits that happen within the state due to you being able to get deeper into REM sleep. Now, the more sleep, the longer you're asleep, the deeper you actually fall into those REM sleep. Some people will say, and some research will say, that you actually lose time. But what I've also read, and this is something that I found, and I can go ahead and give you guys resources at the back end, is that as we get older, we lose our ability to actually stay in the REM sleep longer. So what ends up happening is you really have to take advantage of what you're doing to go ahead and go to bed, as well as what are you doing to enable the mind when you wake up. Because again, sleep is just a state of being, meaning you need a set of intentions or a routine that puts your mind at ease. And then you need a set of intentions that allows you to go ahead and put your mind at active going into the day. And this is where actually I truly believe in what I've seen with individuals I've worked with. at the tactical space who have these weird blocks of sleep, all the way down to your general pop, where stressed out mother. Julia probably has had conversations with me about sleep as well as also about this, is to like look at sleep from this perspective of like, I need to go ahead and block it out, right? So there's a lot of information to pack into that, and I don't mean to spend so much time there. I just wanted to highlight and look at that because the next two slides are really important, because this is how we actually are going to be able to back plan our sleep, or be able to look at how do we get high qualities of sleep and understand that we need to have these boundaries and principles that we need to hit every single week, and they're very simple. So moving on to the next slide, I want to go ahead and look at 3 points. All right. And those 3 points is going to be very easy. Think of sleep as cycles per night, not hours. All right. You want to hit anywhere between 28 to 35 cycles per week. And that's going to be 3 to 5 cycles per night. And there's going to be a lot of questions. Well, what is a cycle? And a cycle actually is going to be a window of what you do when you get through a full REM cycle, meaning you go through state 1, state 2, state 3, and state 4. And then it resets again. That is one cycle. Now, let me go ahead and give you a little story that I actually utilized back in 2017. I don't know if I shared this with you before, Julia, but I fell down this rabbit hole of paraphasic sleep. And if you never heard of paraphasic sleep, they sleep in these cycles, but they sleep for 90 minutes, wake up for 90 minutes, sleep for wake up 90 minutes, wake up for 90 minutes. And they started using this, and you can find this in a book called The Power of Naps and the Myth of 8 Hours of Sleep. And the doctor here talks a lot about the idea of that 90-minute sleep cycles allow for us to get more rest than the 60-minute sleep cycle. Because what happens is that 60-minute sleep cycle ends up having us wake up in the middle between state 3 or state 4, or potentially you're still stuck between state 2 and state 3, and you wake up and you have this sleep drunkenness, and it's called sleep inertia. So what he was starting to do was, for about 30 minutes, state 1 and state 2 are active, and you can wake up out of it, and you actually don't have sleep inertia because you're not falling into state 3. But then what happens when we start getting into that 45-minute, that 30-minute window, we start to actually fall into that state 3, which takes us out of what we're trying to do, and it makes us feel drunk, it makes us feel lethargic. And that's the reason why individuals don't like taking naps. So what we started to do was we started to look at naps in 30 minutes windows, and then we started looking at naps in 90-minute windows, because now we can get a full sleep cycle in under that 90-minute window. Or if I want to take a nap for the day, we do 30 minutes, which then becomes just a third of that 90-minute window. So if I stack 3 sleep windows, 30-minute windows, I still get a sleep cycle in the day. So what's really cool about that is if you're behind on sleep cycles and you look at sleep in that aspect, I need state of beings of 30-minute windows here for the next couple of days to catch me up on sleep. I am now learning how to sleep bank, because now sleep is a state of being, and we can do it anytime, anywhere, how we like. And I think that's the thing that we forget, is that, oh, well, I don't have my bed with me to sleep in. No, you can take a nap in your car. You can take a nap at your desk if you wanted to. You can take a nap anywhere you feel comfortable and the environment is safe for you to actually relax for that 30 minutes. So bringing it full circle to talk about why do I look at cycles as a way of navigating my sleep. Well, going back to that story, I had really bad sleep from TBIs, PTSD, just it wasn't healthy. I was having issues. So I really had to rechange and do a lot of things. And what I ended up starting doing, what the main thing was this 90-minute sleep window. So for 3 weeks straight, I slept 90 minutes on, 90 minutes awake, 90 minutes on, 90 minutes awake, between the hours of pretty much 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. That's what I did throughout it. By week 3 going into week 4 in the back end, I was now sleeping from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. completely through the night. And I hadn't done that in almost probably a year, maybe longer than that. It was really inconsistent. And what I found was I reset the sleep pressure that I had. What I did is I got so exhausted that my body finally was like, oh, this is the way you need to sleep. And I was able to sleep through the night because I was looking at sleep in terms of this cycle aspect. Now, there's a lot more that probably can go down into that, but as we're again covering wave tops, I wanted to bring this to everyone and be like, all right, cool. Understand that you need a set of behaviors about 45 minutes to an hour before bed. I need a set of behaviors to enable my mind when I wake up every morning, or whenever I wake up, depends on what your state is in terms of your window of your job and your profession or personal life. Boom, you go ahead and look at it from that standpoint. So now I have behaviors that happen from there. And then I can go ahead and now block out my sleep, meaning that if I need to go ahead and sleep between this window, I can now stack how many cycles of sleep I need per night based off of what I need to get done, and understand that the less cycles I have, potentially the more tired I'll be, or the less recovered I will be. The more cycles I get, the more recovered I am. And that is the simplest way I can look at it. So now, as we talked about, one sleep cycle equals 90 minutes. That's a 90-minute window, right? So I have one 90-minute window. And if we go ahead and look at this here, you look at my blocks, 3 cycles equals 4.5 hours of sleep. That's it. And the minimum sleep that a lot of people get is anywhere between that 3 to 5 hour sleep window. Think about how many times you're waking, what that does to you. That throws off your circadian rhythm. It throws off your REM sleep. You're now waking up in the idea of stage 3 every single time, because you're at this 3 and this 3 and this 5, where potentially you only had 2 cycles of sleep, or you got woken up in the middle of your cycle, of your 3rd cycle of sleep, meaning at that stage 3, where you're now waking up still tired and lethargic. So the idea here is to avoid any kind of sleep inertia or sleep drunkenness, and to allow for you to wake up either at the start, to wake up at the start and the end of each sleep cycle. That's the idea here with these cycles. So 3 cycles equals 4.5 hours of sleep. So 90 minutes, 3 hours, 4.5. So if you know that you only have to, you went to bed at midnight and you have to be up at 4:30, well, then know that that's your sleep window. Then you're only going to get 3 cycles in. Or let's say you have to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning and you only get 4.5 hours of sleep. Then you back plan from that 2 a.m. till the time you have to go to bed. It's the same thing if you want to get 6 hours of sleep. For example, if Julia wants to run a race at 5 a.m. in the morning, she has to wake up anywhere between 90 minutes to 2 hours before the race, right? So then I'm waking her up. She's waking up at 5. I'm going to go or she has a race at 5 at start time. I'm waking her up at 3 a.m., right? So then I back 6 hours of sleep behind that. That's 4 cycles. Now, hey, Julia, I want you to get 5 cycles in, meaning then we go ahead and back plan by 7.5 hours. That's the time that I should be in bed and asleep by. I hope that makes sense for everybody, and I make that example as easy as possible. So just back plan from the time that you have to wake up, you back plan your cycles of sleep, or those hours how you want to look at it. So again, if I have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, the latest I can go to sleep is going to be midnight. The earliest I can go to sleep is going to be my math right now. It will be 9:30, I believe. Correct. Yes. Yep. 9:30. So again, 7.5 hours of sleep. That's 5 cycles. The recommendation again per week is going to be 28 to 35 cycles. 28 is the minimum. Now, can you get less than that? Sure. Just like anything else, you can get less nutrition in. But if you're down below that for too long, guess what happens? It does start causing issues, and we start to see this happen. So you want to go ahead and play around with that happy medium. Stay within those principles of 28 cycles of sleep and 35 cycles of sleep. And realistically, if you think about it, 5 cycles for a 7-day period is 35 cycles of sleep. It's not too hard to get if you look at it from that standpoint. So realistically, bringing it kind of full circle to that point, and what I'm looking at sleep is, let's go ahead and look at sleep in terms of, again, cycles, and how our REM sleep actually works, and how we can actually utilize our own cycles of REM to keep us moving forward and actually navigate our sleep to help improve the quality, and I guess some would say density, of our sleep as a whole. So yeah, Julia, do you have anything on those 2 or 3 topics that I just covered?
2 things. First is the cycles are easier to understand and more important to lay out that way, because once you interrupt a cycle, when you fall back asleep, you don't resume your cycle. You restart your cycle. So fractured and fragmented sleep is the same as having, if you should have 5 cycles tonight, now you've only got 3. Even though you may have started 5, you didn't finish 5. Perfect. And then, talking about going quickly into these cycles, efficiency is what we're talking about. I read, and I hope I have the name right. I actually should Google it. I'm in front of the computer, but I think the guy's name is Bud Winter. He was some type of sports performance coach, but the military method is what they call it, of entering these stages quickly. And he was a performance coach, I think, for like Navy pilots. And he said these pilots have this window to sleep. So neurologically, we know that we need this REM sleep in order to function at if you're a Navy pilot, like, you need to make these tiny split-second decisions. So he and I actually use this in yoga for Shavasana. So you lay down, it starts with breath, and then you literally relax face, tongue, chin, shoulders, and you literally move your way down. And usually by the time you get to your like abdomen somewhere, people are usually asleep. So that will like shuttle you quickly through the earlier stages of sleep and help you fall into those deeper stages more quickly and efficiently. That's
So
all I got for that.
no, I love that. And that's something that, a lot of people forget, is the fact that like we don't want to spend a lot of time in state 1 or state 2 or stage 1 and stage 2. We want to spend a majority of our time in stages 3 and 4, meaning that we have that 90-minute window. We have to get through those first 2 states as quickly as possible to spend as much time inside of that state 3 and 4. And what Julia's talking about is an intention, or it's in a routine that allows for your body to go ahead and be like, all right, I'm down regulating because I'm doing this breathing pattern to put me into a state of sleep. That's all that happens. That's all we're doing. It's not rocket science. It's literally it's a trick. It's a magic trick you're doing to your body to go ahead and down regulate it. You're learning how to hack your own body by adding in breath. That simple. And I guess that's something that sleep really is. And yes, do I go to sleep with my mind racing all the time? I'm normal, just like everybody else. Same thing with Julia, I'm sure, and same thing with all of you guys. We all have that issue, but it's learning how to know how to separate the two, compartmentalize it, meaning though it's time to sleep. Sleep means that I don't do anything whatsoever but sleep, and that is the goal, and that is what's happening. That is it. Understand that, hey, when I wake up, I can attack whatever else is in front of me. And I think, again, that is the reason why I keep talking about sleep as the new frontier. So I'm going to hand it over to Julia now and let her dive deep into some of these concepts here for her before we open up the floor.
Ooh, deep into these concepts. Okay, so a couple of things that can interfere with these cycles of your sleep. There's some metabolic, which basically means our endocrine system, which specifically we're just going to mention briefly today, cortisol and blood sugar. So if you're one of these people who have a really difficult time, and we're assuming that everyone in here, like George said at the beginning, does this adequate sleep hygiene. Like you treat your sleep routine as sacred, you understand its role in your life, you don't drink alcohol, you don't use prescription sleep aids. Like we're talking about someone who is having difficulty despite the upfront investment into sleep improvement. So cortisol, when it is significantly high in people who have chronic stress, these are your classic, like, I can't sleep. You're wired but tired is the way that it's classically described. So there are ways that we can capture what's called your diurnal cycle of your cortisol. Whenever we wake up in the morning, our cortisol levels increase. This helps us prepare for the day. It helps us get up in the morning. This increases and our body temperature increases. This is actually an endocrine method to tell us to wake up. So temperature up, cortisol up, helps us get ready for the morning. Throughout the day, we should see what's called a diurnal curve of this cortisol kind of sloping downward. And then your stress hormone, it should make sense, right, to be lowest at bedtime. A lot of times I run hormonal studies, dried urine studies specifically, and patients will submit urine during certain times of the day, and it will actually give me a measurement of your cortisol throughout this diurnal curve. And I'll see some crazy stuff. I'll see, cortisol up in the morning and at lunch, and then, non-present at the end of the day. I'll see them flip-flopped and reverse and all kinds of just stressed out, not normal cycle people. There are certain ways to correct that, but in order to correct it and in order to know how to correct it, you have to have data, right? You need to know where your curve is messed up. And the first thing that we do to fix any curve abnormality with the diurnal cortisol curve is we get people to improve the quality of their sleep, not increase the quantity. If you're one of these hard to stay asleep people, hey, I wake up 3 to 5 times a night, and it's consistently during this time of the day or consistently after I have this type of meal, you may be having some blood sugar dysregulation. Usually it's low blood sugar, but if you're someone who has had significantly high cortisol for many years and now your insulin sensitivity is down, you could be high at night. Um, Investigation and a metabolic assessment of your A1C, which is an average 3 months of blood sugars, checking blood sugars during the middle of the night by simple finger prick, or if you have a continuous glucose monitor subscription, or if you just are paying attention and you are needing all these like late night snacks. If you wake up during the middle of the night and then you're like, man, I'm super hungry, that could be a blood sugar dysregulation. So there, that's another metabolic influence that could interfere with the quantity of your sleep. If you have both of those things, then you probably are one of these people that need some blood work because you need to know how to fix. What's super interesting on top of allopathic, which is classic Western medicine, and ancient Chinese medicine, Eastern medicine, is there is a thing in Chinese medicine called the meridian 24-hour body clock. And it actually breaks down our meridians, which are energy pathways that correspond with organ function. And a classic high percentage wake up time for most people is that 1 to 3 a.m., which generally is a liver issue. I see a ton of detoxification problems with a lot of my hormonal patients. If your liver is not functioning well, if your GI system, here they are together, if your GI system and your gut are not functioning well, what's happening is at night, you are not able to get rid of byproducts, toxins, used hormones are reabsorbed, which you don't want, which actually do DNA damage. So if you're waking up that 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. and it's consistent and you've had lab work done and your blood sugar is okay and your cortisol looks okay, this may be a simple thing of like, hey, we need to do a specific protocol to support your liver. Let's get this flowing and then let's reassess your sleep. So I think it's important to not ignore a lot of these Eastern and ancient medicine techniques and assessments because they've been around for thousands of years and they have very easily replicated processes, and the data for some of the stuff like acupuncture and this meridian clock they're just excellent. You have to combine both is what I'm trying to say, for crying out loud, Julia. Also, that 1 to 3 a.m. section is when your body is both detoxifying, releasing, and sometimes repairing. So if you are a woman who is having very heavy cycles, or you're an endurance athlete and you've had your cycle for like 20 days straight because you've got this pregnenolone steal because your cortisol is super high, this is when we need to really look into female specific issues like anemia, some low ferritin, or some actually like bottled up emotional trauma that needs to be addressed as well. So those are metabolic concerns of why we can possibly wake up during the middle of the night. And then George, I think the next one is the hormone one. Yeah. And then the other is hormones. Touched a little bit about how the hormones need to be detoxified and pulled out and expelled through the stool once we use them. But one thing that is, George mentioned it earlier, your REM sleep declines with age because a lot of these hormones naturally decline with age. For women, perimenopause usually starts around the late 30s to early 40s and sometimes can last 10 to 15 years. So a decline or a fluctuation in your estrogen and progesterone is like the sleep queen. You're going to have disruptions in sleep. You're going to have night sweats. Instead of your temperature going down at night preparing you for sleep, you're going to have your temperature go up and dramatically affect those adequate cycles. So sometimes if you're going through those changes, your cycles are irregular, and you want to know more, all we do is we capture those hormones, we capture their downstream metabolites, which is what your liver breaks them into. And then we can figure out, hey, how can we support you either with biosynthetic, which are supplements and plants that increase natural production of hormones, or bioidentical hormones, which are, the ones that we make in a lab that are identical to our hormones and replace that way. So there is plenty of options for support, because menopause and perimenopausal transitions for women can be difficult enough. But if you are not sleeping and going through these cycles, foundationally, your immunity is going to decrease. You're going to have more gut issues, and it's going to make the transition of life and just way more frustrating and difficult. And then inversely, men, when you have a gradual decline of testosterone as you age, testosterone, when it starts to decline, your sleep quality is affected. We've got George has quite a significant population of retired military and law enforcement, and I have quite a few of those as well. When you start to get into actual true sleep issues, sleep diagnoses, such as obstructive sleep apnea, sometimes it can be secondary related to body size, big, thick necks. Sometimes you'll see these wrestlers and jujitsu guys with just traps and these tiny, short, thick necks. That airway may actually be functionally compromised, and causing these apneic episodes where you breath hold or you obstruct your airway and then you wake up. And then primary sleep apnea is where you have TBIs, you can have brain damage, you can have significant head trauma that now is affecting your actual brain's ability to regulate your sleep. I have had this huge fascination in the last couple of weeks with melatonin. Everybody thinks that melatonin is just produced in the pineal gland, and it's just used for sleep. Melatonin is a radical detoxifier and an immune support for us. And the data of dosing melatonin at 0.3 milligrams 3 times a day during an acute viral illness has actually shown to reduce how long you're sick. I know a ton of integrative medicine providers that use melatonin as part of their whole, like, I got the flu regimen. And we actually make 800 times the melatonin in our gut than we do in our pineal gland. But the gut is bursting it in these small increments throughout the day. But what will happen is your body will try to compensate for this melatonin that it may lack in the evening. So if you have an impaired gut, the gut can't support. So there's this huge symphony that's happening with all of these hormones and all of these substances that have hormonal activity like melatonin that take a little bit of teasing out. It's called a diagnosis of exclusion. It's when somebody comes in and says, hey, I have a headache. Okay, there's 1,000 things that can cause a headache. And what we do is we roll these things out until we have a reasonable clue of what's going on. And then we treat with the least effective, highest benefit plan that's individualized for you as possible. It's the same thing with sleep. Sleep studies now, if you have concerns about somebody who's snoring or breath holding or snorting and then waking up, you can do a sleep study at home now. You're hooked up, you have an EEG looking at brainwave activity, a pulse oximeter looking at your heart rate and your respirations, your blood saturation of oxygen. There are so many things now that we can do to address sleep issues without you having to go to this gigantic, traditional, terrifying sleep lab. Shift work and night shift, you're throwing off circadian rhythm, which is that beautiful melatonin cycle that starts, and it includes the body temperature. It includes your cortisol. That's all your circadian rhythm, all of these things together. When you shift work and night shift, that everything just gets screwed up. I really try to make people understand, like, hey, if we can't find the strategy or find a way for you to have these adequate sleep cycles during your nighttime, then this is the group of people that sometimes we have to stimulate or wake the brain up a little bit to be able to deal with these weird sleep cycles with like armodafinil, which Provigil, which you mentioned earlier, George. And then I think the last thing that I really want to touch on is, you know, supplements for sleep. You'll read Huberman stuff, which Andrew Huberman does quite a deep dive medically. I think it's pretty comprehensive and comes from a unique place because he's a retinal specialist. So a lot of the things that he recommends for sleep involve biohacking or understanding the way that your eye interacts with your brain. So I do like some of his stuff, but not everything in sleep requires supplementation. Some of it just requires dedication. If you don't have these sacred processes around your sleep and you don't instill these, say, into your children, what you're going to have is you're going to be chronically ill, chronically under recovered, and chronically miserable with probably poorly behaving kids for a large majority of your life. Um, I am a huge blue light blocker fan. They also make you look cool on Instagram, so it's double, double benefit there. But I want you to understand that sleep shouldn't overwhelm you. The first thing that you should do is control the controllables. Like if you're doing something that you know you shouldn't, cut it out and then scientifically know thyself, add these things on. And if you get to a point to where you're stuck or you're like, hey, I think metabolically or hormonally, I have something going on that's interfering with me entering these blocks, and then reach out. It's important. Like if you're going to pay money to have someone coach you as a human towards a goal in life and athletics, then I think you owe it to yourself to like do it with longevity in mind. Don't sacrifice your health on the back end for like what you're trying to achieve now. The whole hustle culture of like, hey, I'll sleep when I'm dead is lame. And I really am glad that I'm seeing a lot of those people go away. And then this is going to be a little not esoteric, but just bizarre. But like, hear me out. If you do decide to schedule a consult because you've got some concerns about your sleep, I probably will make you do a parasite cleanse. There is significant data suggesting that a large majority of Americans have some type of intestinal parasite, amoeba, or something that will disrupt your sleep cycle. If you are a teeth grinder, if you have kids that bedwet, if you have horrific sleep around the full moon, then you probably should complete a parasite cleanse. The protocols are, can be, pretty mild to pretty significant, but it's kind of one of those things, right? It's like it's diagnosis of exclusion. And also, I mean, what can it hurt? Sleep is so important. Like there's no telling, George, I don't know, how many thousands of dollars have you spent on like sleep and recovery stuff?
I honestly, I went down a rabbit hole 2007, 2019, and I luckily I was with Softly at the time, so like we got to do some research, do that. But I mean, some of the sleep equipment that we were using, there was Omega Waves, we had the Aura Ring, we had sleep pads
Yeah.
that we were using. And it was interesting because like out of all of that information, it really didn't do anything for me. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
What really made the huge drastic change was actually looking at it from, I guess, the perspective in which what we're talking about right now was really more of the idea of like how to take care of sleep. Now, all the data and stuff is great. It's the same thing with HRV. It's the same thing with resting heart rate. It's the same thing with all of this stuff. Like the data is great, but if we can't connect it to a feeling awareness, then it doesn't really do anything for us as a whole. And I think that's the idea behind this, is like really creating this consciousness of feeling that allows for us to be like, all right, what did I eat before bed that woke me up in the middle of the night? Or, hey, wait a minute, I actually am waking up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. having to go take a piss. Well, why is that? Well, how much water did I drink before? Oh, how much sugar did I have? Or is this a blood sugar spike of some sort? Or, hey, I'm sleeping from, I'm sleeping from 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., but I'm still waking up really tired. Well, what does the sleep disturbances look like? That's where the sleep pad comes into. That's where the omega-3 or is it the omega? Yeah, it's the omega wave. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
guys, the Omega Wave, as well as the pulse oximeter, the Aura Ring comes into play, because then you can be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was holding my breath, or that must be me holding my breath. It's not really waking me up, but it's causing a sleep disturbances that's pulling me out of these cycles of sleep and making me restart. And that's a really good point there. So, yeah, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, there's been thousands of dollars spent on sleep equipment to figure out sleep, when yeah, realistically, I think what I utilized for the first year of like resetting and fixing my sleep was like at nighttime, I use candles for the whole time. I use blue blockers, and I walked around with candles in the house. That was like Savannah and I were just starting to date and start living together at that time period, which she's my wife now. But at that time period, I was walking around with candles in the house. You can ask her. She's like, knows I'm the weird dude who does this thing. She saw me go through the 90 minutes of sleep cycles that I did. And I want to highlight something, we didn't talk about it, and I'm not going to take away from the sleep idea, but I was also fixing my nutrition at that time period. What's funny is I went vegetarian during that month.
Huh.
I went vegetarian during that month, but it was weird how I did it, because it wasn't like I just consumed fruits. It wasn't that at all. It was like just beans and rice and vegetables and like that was like that was my meals. That's all it was. So it wasn't as much veg or as fruit as possible. So again, I don't know how that is. My sleep did improve more when I started going into the more nose to tail style of eating, as what I do now today. But it was one of an experiments. I was also doing endurance work like crazy during that time period. So I feel like those three things, where I removed a bunch of processed foods and processed carbohydrates and processed sugars, I'm pretty sure I could have used meat at that time period probably. So we can look at that, as well as, I was sleeping, or my aerobic work I was doing was all below that, like 140. I was like at 130 at the time period. I was just getting into ultra endurance. I think I was like my small time period. So there was a lot of things that I was playing around with at that time period that again, that we just got done talking about, had huge benefits and impacts outside of all of the other technology that is out there for sleep.
Yeah. And I mean, I put up a post, I think, on my personal Instagram, like sleep was one of those things, honestly, that almost destroyed my marriage. Um, I have always, your parents do a good job of like ingraining certain things in you that really aren't true. My mom used to call me just a piddler. I'd stay up all night and just like piddle, to do whatever. It was productive at least. Um, but then I carried that kind of into college. I wanted to be, and I was when I was little, the kid that always went to sleep first at the sleepover, like I was in a dark closet sleeping. But I think over time, like the pressure to perform more, and especially going through graduate school and then starting new jobs and then doing shift work at the hospital, like I heavily relied on a plethora of prescription medications for years for sleep. I mean, at one point I was taking stimulants and depressants like at the same time. And what really broke it for me, I mean, it's probably been within the last 10 years, honestly, was, I mean, I was taking such significant doses of Ambien that I would drive from my house near Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and then all the way to the other side of Hope Mills, which is like an hour and a half away almost with traffic, and wouldn't remember driving.
Damn.
And I'm okay. And this was about the time that studies were coming out suggesting that there was a correlation between, hypnotic use, hypnotic drugs for sleep was contributing to early onset dementia. And I'm like, okay, I have to do something. And I pulled that drug away and didn't sleep for half a week. And it was miserable, but eventually, like, your body will make you. And then I said, well, I need to control this thing. Like, this is I am not recovering. I'm unhealthy because of this thing. And then Ben, my husband, significant TBIs, actually sleeps with a CPAP from primary sleep apnea, but he also has some secondary contributions. Well, he was significantly tongue tied, which he actually just had that released. And I think it's going to dramatically improve his like upper airway resistance when he's sleeping. But there was a period where Ben was drinking and taking a bunch of Ambien to be able to sleep because of anger, and some other issues that he was sorting through. And I mean, I got to a point to where, we were just not sleeping and angry and hateful towards each other. And we got him a series of stellate ganglion blocks, which will actually reset your circadian rhythm. So there are a ton of different options, but I think you're absolutely right. You have to pay attention.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention to what is the factor that I did that made this happen. And then once you weed that all down, if you're still having issues, that's when we can look at, other things. But like the commitment to getting the blocks in is significant. I don't think we would be having this conversation 100 years ago, because I doubt that anyone was not committed to sleep,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but
100%.
now it's considered like, a luxury or something that we have to have Huberman podcasts about. But
and us sitting here talking about it too, right? It's like we're playing the game and throwing it into the pond and hoping everyone listens.
Yeah. And also that I have a crush on Andrew Huberman. I just realized it. But no, I think I'm done unless anybody's got questions.
Yeah, I'm done too. Anybody got questions? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we got a couple people on, or a couple. Anybody want to ask some questions?
Yeah, so I know you guys talked about the gut health side of things, right? So when should, I don't know, I guess you start looking into that gut health, and is that more just the food you eat, or do you really need to like do the whole deparasiting thing?
Well, I would do the parasite thing in general anyways. But no, so gut health, the reason that the gut health should be addressed, honestly, anyways, is because with a leaky, abnormal percentage of bacteria in your gut, you can't control your blood sugar. And there is a very, very important bacteria called Akkermansia that plays a pivotal role in your melatonin production and bringing your blood sugar down. So it may be one of those things where if we originate with a gut issue, that we can reset everything else without like supplementing this, supplementing that, and just fix your gut. And what's strange about the gut microbiome is everybody usually thinks that it's like the whole gut, the small intestine and the large intestine. The very important gut microbiome is actually in your very bottom third of your colon, right before your rectum originates. So a lot of times, if you're like taking probiotics to reset your gut, if that pill isn't making it through the stomach and down into that area, then you're not rebuilding your gut biome. So it may be that you just rebuild the gut biome from there. If you have food sensitivity concerns, just a regular food allergy panel will not pick up on them. IgG and IgGE need to both be measured, because food sensitivities can occur 3 to 72 hours after you eat them. And they can be as mild as all of a sudden your skin is dry, or man, I feel like a little stiff, or it could be, hey, I slept like garbage. But trying to figure out what you ate like 72 hours ago, it's really not realistic. We've got some blood panels, some serum panels that test 88 foods, and they test a lot of the health foods. I have a sensitivity to avocado. And now that I know that I do, now that I've removed it, now it makes sense to me. So to answer your question, Alex, sometimes you can just reset the gut with the appropriate probiotic for the appropriate amount of time, and then the sleep will improve. Or you reset the gut and you're still having issues, and then you go, well, let me see why I'm having issues, and then you check out the food sensitivities. I think a lot of times by the time people are getting really serious about sleep, they've already removed all these significant insults to their gut. Mm-hmm. But one thing though that is insulting to the gut that people forget about is if you vape anything, including cannabis, it will make the gut more permeable. So if people are going to utilize cannabis for sleep, if they're going to use it at bedtime and they can tolerate an edible or a tincture form, I usually will recommend that people transition from that, vaporized version to like some type of edible. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. Very interesting stuff. Cool. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And then I also saw for the blocks, right? So you guys recommend
Yeah,
between 28 and 35, I believe it was.
correct.
So is there any downside to getting more than 35?
No, actually, there's not. I've looked up that and I've actually asked Dr. Nick St. Louis or Louis, is that how you say his name? But he says no. It just actually it's benefit for you. So what happens is you can take the blocks, and let's say week 1 you only slept 28 cycles, then week 2 you could potentially sleep 37 cycles. Does that make sense? So you're still balancing it out. So
Okay.
over a 4-week period, you've now been able to sleep on an average between 28 to 35 cycles per month per 4-week cycle.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So what you're really doing, and the reason why I really enjoyed the whole sleep cycle aspect was because if I missed a couple cycles below that minimum the week prior, I was able to go ahead and then stack the savings account the week following, the coming week after that. So the way I like to look at it, it's like a bank, a sleep bank. So I have a savings account, and then I have my account, my primary account. If I start to dip below that, I have a savings account to help me out, but I only have a certain amount of in that savings. Once it's gone, now I'm depleted. So what I'm trying to do when I'm able to sleep, over an average of, let's say, 30 cycles per week, I'm now able to get in 33 or 35 or 36 or 37, potentially 40 cycles in. You now able to put that in the savings account. So when you go into a period where you're not sleeping that many cycles, you have that there for a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So on the sports performance side of things, right? It's not as dependent on what you got the night before, but kind of what that previous week has looked like.
I would look at both of them. I'll look
Okay.
at what that night prior and then what the week looks like. It's the same idea with you when you look at resting heart rate or HRV for that day. Then what's the coefficient variation of your HRV or resting heart rate from a 7-day average the week prior?
Okay. Awesome.
Because it does matter, because it's all accumulation, right? Stress is stress.
Yeah.
So the less sleep you get, the more stress you put on, the least amount of stress you're actually relieving. The more sleep, the more stress I get to relieve, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
From like cellular and longevity perspective, your savings account is where you're getting mitochondrial repair. It's where you're actually cleaning up components of your cell, getting rid of the parts that aren't functioning, and then that's your actual anti-aging sleep there.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
huge.
Okay.
massive.
And I want to add to this too. So for example, I've done 5 cycles of sleep every single night with two naps during the day.
Holy crap. Wow.
So
Impressive.
yeah, but guess what I was doing? I was only an athlete. I mean, I was working for Softly at the time, and I was running, I think, like 12, 13, 14 hours a week at the same time. So it was like, I'm sleeping these many hours, I'm sleeping these many cycles, that I'm up doing work, I'm training, I'm taking a nap, doing whatever else, and just trying to get the naps in. And what I ended up realizing was, going into like 100-mile race or going into these long endurance events, I was able to sleep bank going into an event to have that sleep to kind of stay awake going into it. Which then I also can use a 20 to 30-minute nap in the middle of a race if I really wanted to, which we've talked about. Julie, I even told Julie, go take a 20-minute cat nap real quick, or hey, relax for 20 minutes, close your eyes if we need to, and let's get back out. Because now by taking that small little break, the efficiency of effort now actually increases by 10 times than compared to you not doing that, and your efficiency is now just completely depleted.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So it's a happy balance of rest, work,
yeah.
And that's all we're talking about.
Yeah, that's that restful non-sleep, where you're doing like an actual autonomic nervous system reset and not an actual like sleep reset. You're not like ebbs and flows and things. So those are super, like, how does my mom say it? I'm just resting my eyeballs. Where like, you're like not quite asleep, but you kind of are. There actually is benefit to that. So if you're in a high stress environment, say you're at one of these like tactical games or something, and in between events, you're like, okay, I'm feeling fatigued, but I have this coming up. I don't have enough time to sleep. Like literally, if you can put yourself in, reset your autonomic nervous system, reset that heart rate, and then like still get the same benefit from it.
100%. I mean, I talk with that with individuals. I mean, I had Carly Stone do it at semifinals. Hey, go take a quick 20-minute nap after her ice bath, right? You're pulling it, we're lowering down temperature, and then boom, put her down into a nap. What does it do to her parasympathetic state? It recovers her so she can get ready to get back at it. And then from there, we had set up behaviors that got her ready to rock and roll for the next workout every single time. Rinse and repeat. It's the same thing, Alec, if you're working with your cross-country kids and you guys got a back-to-back race weekend, right? Like implementing a nap or implementing these cycles of sleep, or being like, hey, sleep's really vital for this weekend because we're going to need it to power out. That's where you can be like, all right, hey, why didn't you perform as well as last week? Well, I only slept 3 cycles last night, coach.
Yeah.
Well, there it is, right? So you start correlating through real life experiences this idea of how important sleep really is, as a whole. Yeah. Ken, any questions at all? Or Robert, you guys have any questions for us?
Yeah, actually, you talked about, building these habits of getting you into sleep and then waking you up and getting you into action. Do you have resources that we could look at to see what these habits are and possibly build our own?
Yeah, so like and that's the really good question, right? Like, why didn't I talk about those habits in here? Because I think that's something more that we have to elaborate on, because there is 20,000 different types of techniques and strategies and resources out there, dude, for us to be like, how do we fix our habits, right? It's the same thing with enabling it. And I think I just started creating the term of like disabling the mind, enabling the mind before sleep and after sleep. And even for night shift workers, if you look at it from that standpoint, it also works. But yeah, I can go ahead and put together something for you. You can send it over. I'll send it over in a group like, hey, this question was asked. Here are some ways to go ahead and have, checks and looking at, hey, these are the symptoms I'm having. And then here's some habits that I can throw in. One could be, and I'll just give a few examples. It'd be blue blockers, cutting out television 5 hours before bed. Once the sun starts to set, no more blue lights, only candles. Hey, make sure you change your eating habits. So eating habits, look to go ahead and take out all processed foods. Like there's a lot of those things in there. Hey, 90 minutes prior to bed, no more drinking anything, no more eating foods. Let's see if that helps. Cool. You can then start playing with leading that up a little bit closer to bed. Oh, I can actually handle doing something 45 minutes prior to bed because it doesn't affect me. But anything after under 45 minutes closer to bed, it does affect me. So again, the habits all just kind of come from a unique skill set that you develop to find what works really best for you. And usually I tell people to go ahead and when you find a lot of these habits, use 2 of them that you can use anywhere at any time. So for me, most of the time now I can do a contrast bath at nighttime. For me, that helps out. And then make sure my room is as dark as possible and as cool as possible. Those are the 2 main points that I try and do anywhere I go. Because it helps tell my body it's time to go to bed. Does that answer your question, Ken?
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, brother.
And I'm going to email George. I made just like a sleep handout that has a lot of those things in it.
Cool.
And it has a majority of what we discussed today, but it has all the techniques in it. And it also has like some over-the-counter supplements with their dosages. If you're going to try to kind of like troubleshoot things yourself. But it's a pretty comprehensive sleep document. And I'll flip it over to George and he can just email it to you guys.
Yeah. We can even simplify it if we need to.
Thank you so much.
Cool, man. Cool, guys. Well, I mean, I think that kind of concludes our time unless someone else has any more questions. But like I said, the idea for this was just a wave tops was to kind of just share a little bit of a different approach and individualization of how we look at sleep as a whole. And again, like I said, we're going to continue doing more of these. I mean, sleep is such a huge topic that we can go ahead and dive into a lot of pieces, just like gut health and just like everything else. So there's endless conversations that we'll have here. And I appreciate everyone's time and listening and paying attention and asking really great questions. It only makes us better and it keeps our standard up high. So if you need to get a hold of myself or Julia, you can go ahead and contact us here at george@gb3athletics.com or Full Spectrum Medicine PLLC@gmail.com. And that will be for Julia. As well as you see at the bottom of the slide, our website's down there. So you guys can go ahead and get that. If you're not in the live class, you will be getting this sent out in a recorded version, and we'll go ahead and make sure to send the slide with you as well so you can see the presentation. I don't have anything else. How about you, Julia?
No, I love that. I love talking about sleep. I really do hate, though, that for years I just disrespected it the way that I did. Thank God we all survive our youth, though, generally.
Yeah, no kidding.
It would have been nice to go straight to my mid-30s, but nah. Speaking of sleep, I could take a nap anytime, all day, every day until the baby sleeps all night. I can't anymore.
Nice, guys.
So much talk about sleep.
Awesome, guys. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Until next time.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.